Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm Dave, aka the Costume Kid, and today we're going to be making an Aquaman costume. Alright, so the new DC movie, Aquaman, is about to hit theaters at the time we are filming this video. It has not come out yet, but I am very hyped and excited for this movie. So I figured this video was the perfect excuse to make an Aquaman costume, and I'm just really blown away by the amazing visuals and costumes we've seen thus far in the trailers and stuff from director James Wan. He's got it down. Aquaman's costume, it's so comic accurate, and you'd think it looks stupid, but it somehow looks amazing. I actually can't even comprehend how cool the costume looks, so I'm really excited to make it here for you guys. But boy, there's gonna be a part of this that, I don't know, it might kill me making this costume. So let's get started. Alright, so the first step, as you already know, is buying the base clothes for our costume. So I'll show you what I've got here. First, there's this orange, tight fit compression shirt. This should work really well for the base of our costume. And then I've also got some green leggings, which should work really well for the lower half of the costume. This is actually really similar to how my Spider-Man costume started out, just with a red shirt and blue leggings, and now it's, well, orange and green for Aquaman. Now, let me tell you about my kind of crazy idea for the chest piece, or the orange there. Now, as you know, Aquaman has a bunch of scales over his entire shirt there. Now, what I could do is just using my orange shirt and taking a black Sharpie, drawing on a bunch of scales. That would work really well for a basic costume, and I'm sure you can buy something like that that just has a bunch of scales on it. But instead, I'm gonna go for the more interesting and, yes, challenging route, and that is I'm gonna use some craft foam and cut out a million tiny scales and glue them over this entire thing. Oh boy. Alright, so I picked up some thin 2mm craft foam here from Michael's, or any local craft store online should have it. This is an orange, as you know, Aquaman, and now we just need to cut a million scales. I don't even know how many. I don't have an estimate as to how many it'll take to cover my entire body, front and back, and arms, but I've got 10 sheets here, and we can always get more. Now, to cut this, you could easily just draw the shape you want and cut it out with scissors. Now, that'll work, but maybe take a little bit too much time for what I want to do. So, to shave off just a little bit more time, I have this 1-inch copper pipe here. Now, I shaped it to be a little bit more like a scale, and then sharpened the edge so that hopefully this will be able to cut through this thin craft foam here. Let me show you. Okay guys, so there was a cut there, and in that time I was becoming a little frustrated of just thinking how insane it would be to need to cut hundreds of these tiny foam circles with that pipe, and it was already starting to hurt my hand. Even with a glove on, it was just not a fun experience. So I went back to the craft store, and I think I might have a solution here. It came in the form of this amazing invention. Now, what is this you see? I didn't know it existed, but what it is a hole punch. Looks a little thicker there. Maybe I could fit some craft foam in it and just punch out some holes that look like that. So let's give it a try. Hopefully it works. Okay, so here's the problem, guys. Basically, this, although it looks thick enough to fit the foam through, the actual metal area in there is just barely too small to fit my 2mm craft foam here. And that's making me very frustrated, because if it did, this would work perfectly. So I'm gonna try to find a solution here. So I'll keep you updated. there was another cut there. And I went to the store again, this time Joann Fabrics. And I picked up, yes, another hole puncher, but this time it's for super thick materials. Alright, and the moment of truth here. Slide, oh, it slides in. Yes, okay. Did it just work? It cut a circle. Yes, sir. Whew. I'm going to be doing this a million more times, but this is easy. I can just sit here chopping away the entire night long. All right, let's cue that massive scale cutting out montage. I'm having a wonderful time. Okay, so I've only got about 3 sheets of the craft foam cut out into circles right now, but I want to start gluing it onto the shirt. I'm going to need a lot more, but this way I can show you some cutting and some gluing, and then through the magic of editing, we'll fast forward a little and the whole thing will be done. Now, something that's going to help me a lot with gluing all of these scales onto the shirt is a mannequin. And luckily, if you saw my previous video, that was the exact reason I made this duct tape dummy over here. So click the card right over there, or at the end of the video here, I'll pop it up. But I made this duct tape dummy. It's an exact replica of my body. We did it by wrapping me in duct tape and filling it with foam and stuff like that. So this should work pretty well. I'm gonna put the shirt over it, and that way it'll match the exact dimensions of my body when we're gluing on all the scales. Now, if you didn't do this and you just glued on the scales while the shirt was flat, it'd be really different once you go to put the shirt on because it stretches weirdly, and you want to make sure this fits you exactly. So either have a friend glue them while you're wearing the shirt, or use a mannequin. You know, this is going to be much easier putting on than it will be taking off once it has all those scales on it. I didn't actually think about that yet. Alright, now I gotta give this guy some muscles. So to do that, I'm going to just cut out some pecs and some abs out of the craft foam and glue them right to the shirt. Now, it's not like I really need these, because clearly this is already what my body looks like, you know. But as you can see in the picture here, it shows the scales actually have that muscle definition, so it was important to add these onto the shirt. But now it is time to add on the scales. Oh boy, I'm gonna start doing this, and I'm never ever going to be able to stop. But I think I'm gonna start at the bottom and just one by one going around the entire thing. This is gonna take a million years. Trying to cover everything. Yes, I'm going on top of these, so these are not gonna be seen. And yeah, let's get to it. Start the time lapse. am pretty much all finished up with the main torso here, both front and back, and I'm ready to move on to the arms. So, whew, finishing this thing up. It's taken a while, but I'm really happy with how this thing is turning out. Now I think I'll only need to go down just past the elbow there because the gloves should take up space that you just won't need to see scales there. As for the rest, the upper part here, I'm not really sure how I'm gonna do that and still, you know, get as much, not full, but mobility in the arms, because with the armpit section there, it's, I don't know, you know my rule, if I can't do the chicken dance in it, then what's the point of even wearing the costume, you know what I'm saying? But without further ado, let's get to more gluing! Okay, so other me right now is just gluing those scales all up and down the arm and even on the shoulder there. And that's pretty much it to complete this awesome torso. So I want to touch on an issue that I know a lot of you are already upset with, but wait, don't write a comment saying, oh, you should have done this. Well, here it is. I used hot glue to attach all these scales. And I know a lot of people don't like using hot glue. But for me, personally, I think it's just great. I absolutely love hot glue. You should use it on all projects you do. And it was just the best glue for this particular application because it sticks really well to that EVA craft foam there, and then it just soaks right into the fabric and bonds the two pieces together pretty easily. Those scales are not going to fall off anytime soon. But if you don't like that, well, you can really use whatever glue you fancy. So, yeah. Now I can just kick back and watch other Dave work his magic there. Yeah, keep gluing those scales. Nice job. I can't actually see him at this point, in case you were wondering. No, there's a split screen here. Can you tell? Yeah, probably. Okay, I'm gonna leave now. And with this last foam scale on the collar there, this thing is done! Woohoo! It's taken so long. This might be the most time-consuming thing I've done so far on the costume kit. There's well over 1,000 scales on this entire thing, but it's completed now. I am so happy. All right. The next thing I need to do is kind of dust it with a bit of gold spray paint because this orange looks pretty cool and it's pretty comic accurate, but in the movie it has a bit more of a metallic finish on that. So I feel if we not totally cover it, but just kind of lightly hit it with some of this metallic gold spray paint, it'll give it a pretty nice final look. So let's do that now. Oh boy, I am back inside from spray painting now. This thing's all dry and I'm just really in love with the color I was able to get out of this because it looks mostly orange from far away, but when you're up close and under some lighting angles, it has some scales look gold. It's really cool. Probably cooler in real life than on camera here, but yeah, I really like it. But this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Finally time for me to try this bad boy on, because right now it's been sitting on a scale model. But without further ado, I'm going to try somehow to take this thing off. It won't be as flexible as it was when I got it on, so I might have a little bit of a struggle there. And then I'll try to put it on, see how much movement I'll be able to get out of it. I'm not really sure. I'm filming this on the first take when I try it on, because for all I know, all of the scales could fall off, and I'll need to get that on video here. So you're along for the adventure. I'm not really sure how this is going to work, but let's do it. Alright, first I can take out this little insert here. I have to mimic a collar, and so it can actually, you know, fit on my head instead of just conforming to my neck there. But let's get this started. Alright, I want to come up off of it, but Let's try to get these arms out first. Really hope I don't damage any of the scales getting this off. That would be It's the problem with making costumes that are relatively stiff yet fit to your body. I really hope I don't have to cut a seam up the back. That'll be my worst case scenario, and then it'll only have to be a zip up thing, but
One eternity later.
Yes! Yes! That took so long. Oh, that was probably the hardest part of this entire project so far, but it's off. Hopefully it'll be much easier putting on and off my body because I can kind of, you know, flex and wiggle through the costume, where this guy, not putting in any effort. Seriously, man, show some help around here. Get the whole thing on. All right, now I'm gonna try this thing on. Finally, all right. It's actually relatively flexible on its own, so hopefully this works. I'm really, really excited for this now. It sounds like I'm really tired, which I am, but I'm also really excited. Yeah! Bring this thing down. Hopefully I didn't squish and fold too many of these, but you can always put them back the way they were after. Oh yeah! I am Aquaman in this thing! So cool. I'm at a loss for words right now, but really this is pretty epic. One of my favorite things I've ever made, if not the best thing I've ever made. And actually these scales are pretty flexible that not only can I do the chicken dance, but I can lift up fairly far. I can make all those action poses, you know, control the 7 C's and all that kind of Aquaman goodness. But man, with all these scales on it looking so cool and that metallic finish, honestly, I could not be happier right now. With this thing on here, I need to make some marks on the back of the arm so that I can glue on these fancy pieces, which are on the shirt, and they just go back there. Share a quick little thing on how I made it. Okay, so I took another piece of that orange craft foam and drew the shape on there. I cut it into little strips and then glued them down over a piece of duct tape for that little added texture in there. Alright, so I got it off now. It was really hard to do. Much harder than putting it on, that's for sure, but nevertheless, it's all okay now until I need to put it on the next time. And we can glue both of these to the shirt. I don't know why this is on there in the first place. It really disrupts the whole scale quality of it, but you know. And with that, I believe we are finished up with this entire Aquaman shirt. Alright, took way too long, but I'm very happy with the outcome, and it's time to move on to the belt. Well, actually first, I'm gonna go to sleep first, but then we'll move on to the belt. Alright, back at it again, and let's get started on this belt here. This thing's eventually gonna be all gold, but to start, we're gonna use some yellow craft foam, because they don't make gold. Now, you could simply make a belt by just cutting a strip of this. That would work, partly, for maybe a little bit of time, but I've had experience making belts out of 100% craft foam before, and it'll just rip apart the first convention you go to. So we should put something underneath it, a bit of fabric of some type, to actually, you know, keep it together, because, you know, I'm gonna use this. I actually don't know what this is, but I found it in my junk box. I think it's an old type of belt, but it's definitely much harder to rip than this stuff is. Alright, so I took that sheet of yellow craft foam and cut it into strips there to cover the base of the belt.
But instead of leaving it at that, I actually took those and cut them into even tinier strips going vertically over the entire thing to add that texture that the belt has. Then I cut an angle on the edge of each one there so that they're not perfect rectangles, they kind of, well, angle in.
I just stacked up this entire tower of all the belt pieces. I don't know if I'll actually need this many, but I wanted to cut them all just in case.
I then, of course, proceeded to glue all of those pieces down onto the belt and actually overlapping just a little bit on the edge there. And then added just a small triangle detail on the top of them. Lastly, I cut kind of a fancier end piece with actually a paper fastener in there just for a little more detail. For the logo, I took a piece of thicker 5mm craft foam, this time it was in white, and I drew the A logo onto it. Is it an A? I've always thought of it as an A for Aquaman or Atlantis, I guess, but I suppose it could just be an arch. Either way, I cut it out and then sanded it down with my rotary tool to kind of smooth it out and give it that cool rounded feature.
So this is pretty much it for our main belt section there, but he's actually got a bunch of different gold pieces kind of around his waist there. I guess you could call them part of his belt, but really they're just additional armor pieces. To make these, we're of course going to be using more foam, you guessed it, but this is a little bit thicker. It's EVA floor mat foam. It's got that texture on one side, but one side is nice and smooth, and that's what we're going to use to cut out all our pieces.
First, I drew up a template, well, really just a basic picture first, because they've kind of got a weird, funky shape to them, and you've really only got one chance when you're cutting it out of the foam. Make sure you label these, by the way, because there's so many of them and they all look really weird. But then I traced them onto the floor mat, and this is always a fun game for me of how many different pieces can I fit in the least surface area. Can I kind of fit together like a puzzle? I don't know if anyone else does that, but it's fun for me, okay? And then I cut them out with a knife. Make sure you sharpen it, get a nice sharp blade, and so you'll get a nice perfect cut. I then did this cool detail where you score a line, not cut all the way through, but just enough, and then you heat it up with a heat gun, or a very hot hair dryer, I guess, and it actually opens up the cut. It's like magic. It just makes a cool impression. And now it's time to glue them all together. But when I did this, I didn't glue them all flat to each other, which is what you want most of the time normally. I instead opted to glue each one just a little bit more raised up from the next one, so that it gives that kind of look.
Alright, now that we've got all of these different pieces here cut out, glued together, good to go, they're a little bit heat formed and curved, all that's left to do is just simply, I dropped it, really? Glue them on to this original belt.
Oh, and you're gonna need to open and close that. So I attached a piece of Velcro to one side of the belt so you can, open and close it.
Alright, and here is my completed Aquaman belt with a bunch of foam armor pieces. This thing's pretty awesome. Once it's fully together, it should look pretty great over the shirt and with everything. But now we just need to paint it with the same metallic gold spray paint. Now, I don't think we're dusting it here though. We should need to get it fully coated, so it'll be a solid gold. Alright, we are finished up with this belt here and all the different armor pieces on it. I'm really happy at how it turned out, and let's move on now. Alright, so moving on down the costume now, our next step would be Aquaman's pants. So if you remember way back at the beginning of this video here, I mentioned that I bought these dark green leggings here. They're the perfect color and I think they're gonna work out just fine. Now as for the detail on them though, I'm not sure. I think I'm just gonna leave them blank right now. They should look fine for this costume, just being plain green leggings. The torso is really scaled up and everything, and the pants, I don't know, they might have some kind of detail on them. Definitely not as noticeable as the shirt is, and not enough for me to want to cut out 1,000 more foam scales to glue all over these pants. But I'll wait until at least I see the movie, then I can see kind of how much detail it really has. Maybe it'll be worth like painting the scales, but yeah, you can do whatever you want. That makes our next real step of the costume, Aquaman's gloves. And his boots, because they're pretty much the same format. For the gloves, I'm going to be starting with these nice white gloves. I'm not sure what they're made of or where I bought them because these are actually from an old costume I made a couple years ago now. Can you remember what it is? Some of you longtime viewers there? Give you a hint. He's on my shirt. You've got about 3 seconds. 2, 1. Alright, it was Green Lantern. See, with these white gloves? Yeah, well, they'll be reused for a new DC superhero instead of just, you know, sitting around my shop getting all horrendously destroyed over here. But, yeah. Okay, so let me show you my idea I've got going on for these gloves. Now, I've got a bunch of this 5mm white foam sitting around. I just used a little bit on the belt there. And here's something that you may have noticed before if you've ever tried to roll something up and you don't get it, you know, perfectly aligned right. It flares out. That's not a surprise to anybody. You know, it makes a shape like that. But that's kind of the look we're going for these aqua gloves, which I made up right now. But if you do that and you roll it up, not, you know, perfectly aligned, it'll kind of flare out, give it that superhero glove look that we're going for. So I figure if we roll it up and glue it together and to the glove, that'll be pretty nice. Then we can detail it up, of course, paint it green, and we'll be done.
So I marked and cut out the angle that I would need to glue the foam at for it to roll up nice and flare out at that perfect angle. And then I glued it right to the glove. Now his glove actually has kind of a little opening with that spike looking area there, so I drew and cut that out too.
Hey, kinda looks like a Christmas tree.
I then glued another piece of foam behind it, and we're about ready for the detail ridges on the side of the glove. Now, I thought for a while on how I'm going to do this effect, and I eventually decided, well, after looking through my junk box, on this kind of clear tube I had lying around. I've used it on a couple other projects. I think it's polyethylene or something. But I glued it down onto the glove a couple strips at a time, and it kind of made, well, I guess I'd call it the skeletal structure for our detail ridges, if you're following me.
Now to kind of skin this whole glove we've got here, I'm going to be using some more 2mm craft foam. This is that same orange stuff, except it's, well, obviously not orange anymore.
I cut a piece of the foam that's maybe just a little bit oversized and then glued it on little by little going over the glove. I'd glue a piece down, then fold it over the next tube, and then glue it back down. So it kind of smoothed it out, yet kept all those ridges in there, and I think it gave a pretty nice look. If you don't want to use foam, I suppose this could also work with tape or maybe paper mache if you really pushed it in through the tubes and get that detail there. After that was done, I of course added just a few more little details with more foam.
It's time to paint. Okay, so while that is drying, we're gonna work on Aquaman's boots. To do these, you could very simply just take some real boots, cover them with maybe some details, foam and stuff, and then just paint them green. Simple enough. But this time, instead of taking an entire, new pair of boots and, kind of, well, not really destroying them would be the right word, but, completely making them into Aquaman's boots, I'm just gonna make some nice foam pieces that you can wear over a regular pair of shoes, and they'll look kind of like the boots. Understand what I'm talking about?
So I took another piece of that EVA floor mat foam, cut it in half, and then wrapped it around my leg, gluing it in the same position that I did for the gloves so it'll flare out.
Okay, so now that you've confirmed that your foot can fit through this, we just need to make a bit in front to cover your regular shoe.
What I ended up doing was taking that puzzle piece edge, the part you usually rip off the floor mat, and then another scrap piece of that 5mm foam. I glued them together in kind of the, way you'd expect a shoe to be, and then took a piece of 2mm foam to connect both of them. That way it can still kind of, bend and flop around there.
Okay, so these are pretty basic, but it's the most simple way I knew how to do it really, and they'll work for a purpose. They don't need to be super incredible. No one's really going to be spending that much attention on your boots versus your really cool shirt there. So to finish these up, all we need to do is pretty much just sand them down with a rotary tool, maybe give them a few craft foam details, stuff like that, and should be good.
For the detail on the boot there, I brought back my old friend, the hole puncher, to give a little bit more of that scale texture.
I really like this detail here because it kind of blends the texture that's on the shirt down to the rest and like the boots here, and really makes it all look like one suit of armor made by one person, so it would have similar textures. Now as for the top part of these boots here, they still look pretty bland and boring, so to texture them up a bit, I'm gonna use some bits from this non-slip mat. It's got a pretty cool texture in there. You may have seen me use it on something like Ant-Man over here to give some top texture, and I think it'll just look really nice on the top.
I glued on the non-slip mat to the boot and then drew and cut out some more pieces out of that 2mm craft foam that matched the shapes I could see in my blurry low-res boot reference picture.
Alright, so this boot here is nearly finished up now, and I'm really happy with how it came out. I love this texture there that non-slip mat gave us. Yeah, I really like how it looks. So now we could paint it right now, or the very last step of this boot is of course making it a wearable boot, because right now it's just this top part and this flap. So, of course, what you want to do is get yourself a bit of elastic. I think this is a headband or something. You can buy any type of elastic anywhere you go, but basically what you want to do is just glue it to both sides of this so that when you put it on your shoe, you understand, it'll stay on your shoe. And now obviously you just wear a black shoe underneath so that, from the top at least, it looks pretty much like an aqua boot. It's time to paint them green.
Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but my metallic green spray paint was actually a little bit thin and translucent, and since I was using both black and white foam, it went on, looking like this. So I actually covered it with a silver first, kind of like a primer there, and then a few coats of the green. Ended up looking fine.
Alright, so all of these are done and in from being spray painted now, and man, I'm really happy with how these turned out. Love that color on there. And I guess this is pretty much it for the Aquaman costume itself, but I think you know what we're making next, so let's move on. Now, of course, it is finally time to make the Aquaman Trident. But as some of you longtime viewers and subscribers may already know, I made the Aquaman Trident last year. But it's a bit different. This was for the movie Justice League. It's made out of PVC pipe, and it's actually not really a trident. It's more of a quindent because it's got 5 points on it. Now, I could just reuse this for the costume, but in the new movie, he's got a completely redesigned new trident. And since it looks like that's going to be the one he uses primarily while he's wearing the full comic accurate costume, I'm going to make the awesome comic accurate gold trident. So here we go. This should be pretty easy because I've already made this, and this is a lot harder and more complicated. Making 3 points, whew, this should be a breeze.
By retrieving this.
I already got one of those.
Not like this one, you don't.
So, like usual, I'm going to be, of course, making my trident out of none other than PVC pipe. So, I went back to the hardware store and got a couple of good pieces. Can't really stand them up fully because they're 10 feet tall each, but we'll cut them down. This is 1 inch and this is 3/4 inch, and that should be all we need to make this. We'll also be using some more foam, of course, and spray paint and all that kind of good stuff, but let's get to it.
So I measured how tall I want my trident to be, just relative to my height there, and then I cut the pipe down on my scroll saw. Now you don't have to use this, you could use a hacksaw or a chop saw, any old saw would work for this, and then I also drilled a 1-inch hole in the side of the pipe.
Alright, so now that we've got this basic frame built here, it's time to actually make them into 3, points instead of just a cross here. So to do that, you of course could use those angles that they sell with PVC to kind of make that shape. But my preferred method, and the way I did it on my original Aquaman trident, is to actually bend the PVC pipe so it'll still be one piece. Now you can't just bend it like that. What you need to do is actually go and get yourself a heat gun. This is kind of like a hairdryer, but a lot hotter. A normal hairdryer would not heat up this PVC nearly as hot enough to bend it into shape. It's pretty toxic when you heat up the PVC pipes, so safety first, wear a respirator mask and stuff, but should work pretty well.
So this takes a while, but eventually it gets hot enough to where you're able to bend it, but not all the way to burning the PVC pipe. There's a little Goldilocks area in there, and I tried my best to bend it into a symmetrical U shape there. It's not perfect, but I think it turned out just fine.
Alright, so now that I've got this thing all heat curved and looking pretty nice, it's not quite glued in there yet, so it can just do that, but it's okay. Now, if you'll notice in here, I actually drilled a second hole and sanded it down just the same way, about a couple inches under it, and that is for this piece of PVC pipe, just a straight piece to fit in there and make that additional detail for the trident. But I think we can start gluing these in here now. Boy, this is different. My other trident took much longer because it had 5 different points that all need to be glued in there. It's, pretty simple, so.
I just used good old hot glue to attach it in there and make sure it's nice and secure, and then I trimmed down all the points to be the same height.
So now that this trident has all these points just hot glued in it right now, you could leave it like this, and it kind of looks like a bunch of PVC pipes hot glued together, but I'd like to make it a more cohesive bond, to kind of make it all look like it's one piece. And to do that, last time I used spackle, just kind of covered it all and sanded it down, and that worked so-so, turned out fine. But of course we're going to be doing something new and something never before used on the costume kid. We're going to be smoothing this out with clay. So I got myself a big tub of air dry clay right here, and I'm ready to get started.
It took some time to get used to working with this, but once you rub it in your hands, it becomes quite malleable and you can smooth it out with some more water, and it gave a pretty great result in the end. But as for right now, since there's a bunch of clay on my hands, I can't exactly touch the camera and move it around to get all those different angles for that edited montage, so you'll settle for this one shot.
Okay, so it's been a little while now, and all this clay is completely dry. But we have one minor-ish problem that kind of happened. I was somewhat expecting it, and that's when air dry clay dries, the water that's in it evaporates, and sometimes it has the tendency to crack. And in my case, yeah, that definitely happened. But no sweat, I'm gonna try to find something around the shop, lying around, that'll have to just fill in these cracks. I could, I suppose, use more clay, but then I'm gonna have to wait a whole nother night for that all to dry, so let's see how this works.
I ended up using this weird wet spackle to fill it in, and it saved the day.
Alright, so the spackle is all good and dry now, but it left sort of the cake frosting texture on it, so it's time to sand it up. So now our next step is making the points for Aquaman's Trident. Obviously, they're not just gonna have a flat top on top of those pipes. We need some nice sharp points. To do this, I'm going to be using more foam, obviously. I'm sure you could guess that by now. I'm just gonna be probably cutting some cone shapes and then maybe sanding them down, something of that nature, kind of eyeballing it until I get a nice point shape. This would also be something to do while either the clay or the spackle are drying, just so you can, save a little time there.
So I drew and cut out the shape for the spikes, and then stacked up the middle one 3 layers thick, and the side ones 2. And then I went back to the scroll saw to cut an angle on all the corners there to kind of round it off a little more. And then as I'm doing this, Dave's got some bad news to tell you.
Hey guys, so real talk here. I just knocked my Trident over, and it fell, dropped onto the floor, and it shattered. Here, see. It's the downside of clay, I guess. So I'm gonna try to just glue all these missing pieces back in here, but I don't have the time right now to re-spackle over the whole thing and then paint it afterwards. So if you see me holding up just one side of the Trident in the video, that's why. It's because the other side's all full of cracks.
Now back to the spikes. I sanded them down with the rotary tool, and then in the end covered them with some more 2mm craft foam to give them that perfectly smooth finish.
Alright, this Trident here is pretty much done. All we gotta do is paint it gold. That was a lie. Yeah, I forgot. We also actually have to do the bottom point as well.
I once again drew and cut it out of the EVA floor mat, and then layered it up 2 layers thick, except for the front where I added a little wedge to put a magnet on it. Then I just sanded it up nice and easy with the rotary tool.
Alright, so now that this is all sanded up and looking nice, the reason I wanted to attach a magnet on the bottom is because this is supposed to be at the bottom of the entire Trident, and if you're walking around with it all day, you don't really want to set it down on something that's, foam, because you can't really, set it down. This is not a flat surface here. So instead, I'm gonna add a magnet both on the flat bottom of the Trident and on here so that you can attach it. These are neodymium. It's gonna be nice and secure when you wanna swing it around and have this cool shape on the bottom. But if you're gonna be walking around with it or you're gonna set it down sometime, you can just take it off and then you can set down the Trident. Understand? Let's do it. So for holding it up like this or swinging around, this end here is not gonna come off. But if you get bored or you ever want to set it down, you can easily just pop it off and you're good to go. Now it's time to paint this.
A few coats of gold spray paint later, and I brought it back inside to add the finishing details, which are some lines drawn with a Sharpie.
Alright, these Sharpie details completed the Trident here, and now this video is done. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends. If you have any questions on this build, as well as your requests for future costumes or props, make sure you leave them in the comments section down below, as well as subscribe to this channel for new videos. I'm Dave, aka the Protector of the Deep. Wait a second, no, that didn't make any sense. The Prop Maker of the Deep, and I'll see you next time.